To save the giant Apache sister from a forced marriage, the poor rancher offered a fake marriage. Miguel had always known that life on the outskirts of the small town was not easy. His ranch was modest, with a few cows and a small patch of land that barely produced enough to sell at the local market. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, the cold wind biting at his face as he tended to his chores. It was not the life of luxury or ease that many dreamed of, but Miguel had learned to find contentment in the small victories of daily life. He liked the quiet mornings, the smell of hay, and the sound of the wind through the trees. Yet he could not deny that the loneliness of his work sometimes pressed heavily on him. One afternoon, while he was repairing a broken fence near the edge of his property, Miguel noticed a group of townspeople gathered in the main square. Curious, he decided to walk into town to see what was happening. As he approached, he heard snippets of conversation that made his heart sink. People were talking about Lila, the Apache woman who had recently come to town to live with relatives. She was tall, strong, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that made people take notice. But the conversations were not about her remarkable presence. They were about her future being decided by others. Miguel slowed his steps, careful not to draw attention to himself. He had heard rumors about Lila. The townspeople spoke in hushed tones about a wealthy family from the north who was determined to force her into a marriage that she did not want. It was not unusual for families to arrange marriages to secure wealth or status, but something about this situation felt cruel, even to Miguel. He could see her standing a few yards away from the crowd, her expression a mixture of worry and defiance. She had noticed the whispers and sideways glances, and though she held her head high, Miguel could see the tension in her shoulders. He watched as a man approached her, his face smug, his tone commanding. "It's for your own good," the man said, as if speaking to a child. "You will marry him, and your family will benefit. There is no reason to resist." Lila's jaw tightened. She shook her head slightly, but she did not speak. Miguel felt a surge of anger and sadness. He knew what it was to struggle, to live a life where every choice was constrained by circumstance, but he could not imagine having someone else decide his most personal choices. For the next few days, Miguel found himself unable to stop thinking about Lila. He would see her in the market or walking along the dusty streets, always with a calm but tense presence. There was a quiet strength about her, a dignity that refused to bow to anyone's will. Yet beneath that calm, Miguel sensed a fear that few people noticed. She was trapped between her own desires and the expectations of others, and the weight of the situation was visible in the way she sometimes paused on the street, looking down at her hands as if seeking strength from them. Miguel knew that he could not ignore this. He had lived most of his life quietly, tending to his animals, repairing fences, and doing his best to survive. But the injustice he saw in Lila's situation stirred something deep within him. He could not stand by while someone else tried to control her life. He had little money, no influence, and no power beyond his own determination. But he had a mind to act, and he had courage. Sometimes that was enough to make a difference. He began to observe more closely, trying to understand the full scope of Lila's predicament. He learned from his neighbors that the wealthy family wanted her to marry one of their sons, a man who had little interest in her as a person, deep-showered, arrogant, and used to having people obey his commands. Refusing the marriage, according to the family, could bring serious consequences not only to Lila, but also to her relatives. Miguel's heart ached at the thought. Lila deserved a choice, a voice, a chance to live her life freely. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Miguel saw Lila sitting alone near a small stream outside town. She was holding a basket of wildflowers, and her eyes were distant, lost in thought. Miguel hesitated for a moment. He did not want to intrude, but he felt drawn to speak to her. He approached slowly, keeping his voice calm.
"Good evening," he said softly.
Lila looked up, startled, then relaxed slightly when she saw who it was. "Good evening," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. Miguel nodded, unsure of how to begin. "I've noticed that you've been under a lot of pressure lately," he said. "I can't imagine how difficult it must be." Lila's eyes flickered with surprise. Most people either ignored her situation or treated it as gossip. "It is difficult," she admitted after a moment. "But what can one do?" Miguel felt the weight of her words. It was not defeat, it was resignation. A young woman facing a challenge she had no power to change. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "the right choice isn't easy, and it isn't always safe. But if you don't try, nothing will change." She looked at him, and for a moment, Miguel saw a flicker of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. "And if one tries?" she asked softly. "Then one might just find a way," Miguel replied. "Even if it's dangerous, even if it seems impossible, sometimes courage is the only option." For a few minutes they sat in silence, listening to the water ripple over the stones. Miguel knew that he wanted to help, but he also knew that he had to be careful. Acting rashly could make things worse for Lila. He thought about his modest home, his few cows, the simple life he led. It wasn't much, but he realized that sometimes the heart mattered more than wealth or status. Over the next several days, Miguel began to plan quietly. He observed the interactions between Lila and the wealthy family. He listened to the whispers in the marketplace and watched for opportunities to help her without causing further harm. He knew he would need courage, cleverness, and a little bit of luck. And he knew that Lila's trust would be essential. One morning, he decided to approach her again. She was gathering firewood near her relative's home, her strong frame moving with ease despite the tension that always seemed to linger. Miguel greeted her and offered a simple smile. "I have an idea," he said. "It might be risky, but it could keep you safe." Lila looked at him carefully, her eyes measuring him.
"What sort of idea?"
she asked. "I think," Miguel said slowly, "that if people believe you are already committed in some way, if they see that you are no longer available for the marriage they want, they might leave you alone." Her brow furrowed. "And how would you suggest we do that?" Miguel hesitated. It was not an easy thing to explain, but he knew the time was short. "I can pretend to be someone who wants to marry you," he said. "Just a story, just enough to make them think you are not an option. It is risky, but it might protect you." Lila looked down at her hands, thinking. She weighed the dangers, the potential for ridicule, and the possibility of success. Finally, she nodded. "If it is the only way, then we will try," she said quietly. Miguel felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The plan was dangerous, yes, but it gave Lila hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to start changing a life. For the first time in many days, he saw a small smile on her face, and it warmed him in a way that no work or success ever had. That night, as Miguel returned to his ranch, he thought about the journey ahead. It would not be easy, and it would not be without obstacles. But he also knew that courage could make a difference, and that even someone with little money and no power could change the course of another person's life. For Lila, for her freedom, he would take that risk. And so, under the quiet stars, with the wind whispering through the trees and the soft sound of his animals settling in for the night, Miguel made a silent promise. He would do whatever he could to protect her, even if it meant putting himself in danger. It was a small beginning, but every journey begins with a single step. And this step was one that would soon change both their lives forever. After days of careful thought, Miguel knew it was time to act. The plan he had been considering was risky, but he could not stand by and do nothing while Lila faced a future that was not her own. The sun had barely risen when he saddled his horse and rode slowly toward the small cabin where Lila lived with her relatives. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear of danger, but from the weight of responsibility he felt for her safety. When he arrived, he found Lila outside arranging bundles of firewood. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The morning breeze stirred her hair, and Miguel felt a deep admiration for her calm strength. Despite the pressure weighing on her, she moved with purpose and dignity, refusing to show the fear that lurked beneath. "I wanted to talk to you again," Miguel said softly, dismounting his horse. "I've been thinking about how we can make sure you're safe from the family that wants to force this marriage." Lila paused, looking at him with cautious eyes. "Have you thought of something?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with curiosity. Miguel nodded. "Yes, it's not perfect, and it's dangerous in its own way, but it might be the only way to keep them from pressuring you further." Lila set down her firewood and leaned against the cabin wall. "Tell me," she said, her tone calm but expectant. Miguel took a deep breath. "We can make them believe that you are already committed. If the family sees that you are not available, they might leave you alone. I can pretend to be the one who wants to marry you. Ha 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 ha. It would be a story, just enough to convince them. Nothing real at first, only what people see." Lila's eyes widened slightly and she bit her lip, thinking, "You would do this for me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Miguel replied without hesitation. "It might be risky, and people might talk, but I believe it will protect you. I don't have much, but I will do whatever I can to help you." Lila looked away for a moment, studying the ground. She weighed the dangers, the embarrassment, the gossip, and the uncertainty of relying on someone else for her protection. And yet, she also considered the alternative. The wealthy family's son was older, arrogant, and controlling. Accepting the arranged marriage would mean giving up her freedom entirely. She could not allow that. Finally, she met Miguel's eyes. "It is dangerous," she said slowly, "but if it is the only way, then we will try. But you must promise me something. We do this only to protect me. We cannot let anyone get hurt, and we cannot let this story get out of control." Miguel nodded solemnly. "I promise. Only to protect you, nothing more." For the next several days, they began preparing for their public ruse. Miguel bought a simple ring at the market, the kind that looked significant enough to convince casual observers, but was not overly expensive. He helped Lila choose modest clothing that would make her appear more like a bride in the eyes of the townspeople. Together they practiced the small gestures, the polite bow of the head, the way they would walk side by side through town, the careful smiles that would show affection without overstepping boundaries. Despite the simplicity of their plan, both of them felt nervous. People in town were curious, and gossip traveled fast. They knew that even a small mistake could unravel everything. But Miguel found reassurance in Lila's calm determination. She moved with grace, keeping her posture strong and her eyes confident. Watching her, Miguel felt a deep admiration. She was brave, not just because of her situation, but because of the way she carried herself despite it. On the morning of their staged engagement, the town square was alive with activity. Merchants sold their goods, children ran along the dusty streets, and townspeople paused to watch the small ceremony. Miguel's heart beat rapidly as he stood beside Lila, adjusting the simple scarf she had chosen for her hair. She smiled at him briefly, a small gesture of trust, and he felt a rush of relief. As they walked through the square, people stared. Some whispered, some smiled, and some shook their heads in disbelief. Miguel kept his expression calm, though inside he felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Lila walked beside him with her head held high, her strong frame drawing attention without arrogance. The townspeople could see her confidence, and they could see Miguel's sincere presence. The story they had practiced began to take shape. A few of the wealthier families approached, curious about the sudden engagement. Miguel spoke politely, explaining that he and Lila had chosen to be together, emphasizing respect and admiration for her. Lila supported him with nods and soft smiles, showing that she was part of the story, fully aware of the plan but maintaining its believability. It was delicate work balancing truth and deception, but they managed to make it convincing. Over the next several days, the story of their engagement spread through town. The wealthy family that had hoped to control Lila began to hear rumors and inquiries from neighbors, curious about the sudden announcement. Miguel and Lila remained calm, never overplaying their roles, letting the simple gestures and appearances speak for themselves. The townspeople, seeing the couple together, slowly began to accept the story as truth. Despite the outward success, the work was not without challenges. People would sometimes question Miguel's intentions, making subtle jokes or asking intrusive questions. Lila, too, had moments of doubt, wondering if the ruse would truly protect her. But each time they reassured one another. Miguel reminded her of her courage and determination, while Lila reminded him that their careful planning could make a real difference. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Miguel and Lila sat on a small hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the air was filled with a quiet hum of evening activity. Miguel felt the weight of the day settle on his shoulders, but it was a different kind of weight now, one of responsibility, yes, but also of purpose. "You've been very brave," Miguel said quietly, watching her profile against the fading light. Lila smiled faintly. "I am brave because I have no choice," she replied, her tone both serious and gentle. "But I am glad you are helping me. It makes this burden lighter." Miguel nodded. "We will face whatever comes together. That is all that matters." In the following days, the plan continued to unfold smoothly. Miguel and Lila made their appearances as scheduled, always mindful of their roles. Neighbors who had been skeptical slowly began to respect the couple, seeing not arrogance or deception, but care and commitment. Even the children in town, who had once whispered and laughed, now looked up at Lila with admiration, seeing her as someone strong and capable. Miguel began to notice something else as well. Lila was not just strong in appearance. She was intelligent, observant, and quick to understand the world around her. Watching her interact with the townspeople, he realized how much courage it took to maintain composure under pressure. Each small smile, each polite word, each carefully chosen gesture was a testament to her strength. By the end of the week, the wealthy family had heard enough. Rumors of the engagement had reached them from multiple sources, and the pressure to proceed with their original plan began to fade. They were unsure of how to respond, hesitant to challenge a situation that seemed settled in the public eye. Miguel and Lila had achieved a small but significant victory, not through force, but through careful planning, courage, and mutual trust. That night, Miguel returned to his modest ranch, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He knew that challenges would come again, but for the first time, he felt that they had a chance to protect Lila and ensure her freedom. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, he also felt the beginnings of a bond forming between them, not just a bond of convenience, but one rooted in respect, trust, and shared courage. Lila, too, reflected on the past week as she prepared for bed. She had faced the fear of losing her freedom and had found an ally in someone unexpected. Miguel was not wealthy, not powerful, and not from her community, but he had courage, kindness, and a willingness to act when it mattered most. That was more important than anything else. And so, as the stars shone over the quiet town, both Miguel and Lila felt a sense of purpose. They were no longer passive participants in the plans of others. They had taken control of their situation, using cleverness, bravery, and careful planning. And while the journey was far from over, the first steps had been taken, and hope had begun to shine in their hearts. After the engagement story spread through the town, Miguel and Lila began to feel a cautious sense of relief. For the first few days, it seemed as if their plan had worked perfectly. The townspeople treated them as a couple, the children admired them, and even some of the local shopkeepers offered congratulations. But Miguel knew that peace was temporary. Rumors had a way of twisting, and not everyone in town was convinced. The wealthy family that had planned Lila's forced marriage did not vanish quietly. They were suspicious of the sudden engagement, and quietly they began sending people to observe Miguel and Lila. At first it was subtle, a man asking a neighbor about the couple, a friend mentioning that the wealthy family seemed interested in their movements. Miguel noticed these signs immediately. His heart sank, but he kept calm. Panic would ruin everything. Miguel and Lila agreed that they needed to be careful. Every time they left their homes, they maintained the public appearance of a loving, respectful couple. They practiced subtle gestures, a shared glance, a polite smile, a hand resting lightly on the other's arm, enough to convince the curious townspeople, but never overdone. Their rehearsals from the previous week now became crucial. Miguel was proud of how naturally Lila had adapted to the act. She was strong and composed, even when whispers followed them through the streets. One afternoon, Miguel noticed a carriage slowing near the market where he and Lila were buying supplies. Two men stepped down, their clothing expensive and their posture arrogant. They asked questions in a way that made it clear they were sent to observe, not to talk. Miguel answered politely, keeping his tone friendly but careful. Lila stood beside him, calm and composed, though Miguel saw her fingers tighten slightly on the basket she carried. After the men left, they did not speak immediately. Miguel felt the tension in the air, but also a quiet pride in Lila's strength. "You handled that very well," he said softly. Lila smiled faintly. "I have to. There is no other way." The days that followed were a test of patience and strategy. Miguel and Lila had to balance maintaining appearances with their real concern, keeping the wealthy family from taking further action. They began noticing small attempts at intimidation. Some townspeople, loyal to the family, made subtle remarks or tried to provoke reactions. Others spread rumors designed to make Miguel seem untrustworthy or Lila seem discontented. Each time, Miguel reminded Lila to stay calm, and together they found ways to respond politely without giving their observers any reason to doubt their story. One evening, while Miguel tended to a small herd of cows, he noticed Lila walking along the dusty path toward him. She looked anxious. "Something happened today," she said, her voice low. "One of the family's men came to the market. He asked too many questions about us, about what we were doing and where we were going." Miguel nodded, understanding immediately. "It is to be expected," he said. "They are trying to see if our story will hold. We cannot let them find a weakness. You must stay calm, no matter what they ask or say."
Lila took a deep breath. I will, but I worry.
What if they do something bold? What if they try to challenge us directly? Miguel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then we will face it together. You are not alone in this, Lila. We have planned carefully, and the townspeople are beginning to believe our story. That is a powerful thing. It may be enough to protect you. Despite their careful planning, the situation became increasingly tense. The wealthy family grew bolder, sending more observers and trying to find opportunities to expose the engagement as a lie. Miguel and Lila responded with caution and intelligence. They avoided unnecessary interactions, maintained their appearances, and relied on the goodwill of the townspeople who had already come to respect them. Slowly, the family's attempts to intimidate them began to lose effectiveness. During this time, Miguel and Lila discovered something unexpected. The shared challenge began to strengthen their bond. They spent long evenings discussing the day's events, planning their next moves, and finding small ways to support each other. Lila shared stories of her childhood, her experiences growing up in the Apache community, and the values her family held dear. Miguel listened with admiration, realizing how much courage it took for her to face each day with dignity. In turn, Miguel shared the struggles of his own life. He spoke of the hard work required to maintain the ranch, the loneliness that sometimes pressed on him, and the pride he felt in being able to manage on his own. Lila listened attentively, her eyes reflecting understanding and respect. Though their connection was born from necessity, it grew into a genuine friendship rooted in trust and admiration. One day, a neighbor approached Miguel quietly while he was repairing a fence. I saw the wealthy family sending people to follow you and Lila, the man said. They are suspicious. Be careful. Don't let them find a way to embarrass you or harm her. Miguel thanked him, knowing that vigilance was key. He relayed the information to Lila, who nodded with resolve. Together, they decided to limit their public outings, visiting only necessary places like the market and the town square, and always appearing confident and composed. Every gesture, every word was calculated to maintain the illusion of a real engagement. Despite the constant vigilance, there were moments of joy. On quiet afternoons, they would walk along the hills outside town, enjoying the simple beauty of the landscape. Miguel showed Lila the small wildflowers that grew near the stream, and she laughed at the curious shapes and colors. They spoke freely in these private moments, away from prying eyes, allowing themselves brief relief from the tension. These small joys gave them strength to face the challenges ahead. However, Miguel knew that danger could strike at any moment. The wealthy family had influence and resources that he did not. He understood that they might attempt a direct confrontation if they perceived any weakness in their story. The possibility of exposure weighed heavily on him, but he refused to let fear control his actions. Every step, every gesture, every word had to be carefully considered. One afternoon, while walking through the town square, they noticed a small crowd gathering near the general store. Whispers floated through the air, and Miguel's heart raced. He and Lila approached cautiously, observing from a distance. A man loyal to the wealthy family was questioning a shopkeeper about their activities, trying to cast doubt on the engagement. Miguel quickly stepped forward, smiling politely. "Good afternoon," he said. "Lila and I are simply visiting the market, enjoying the day. We appreciate your curiosity, but there is no need for concern." Lila stood beside him, her posture straight and her expression calm. "Yes," she added, "we are simply walking through like everyone else. There is nothing unusual here." The shopkeeper nodded, and the questioning man hesitated, unsure how to respond. Miguel and Lila's composure, combined with the support of the townspeople, made the man retreat without further confrontation. Miguel exhaled quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The ruse had worked once again. That evening, Miguel and Lila returned to the small hill overlooking the town. The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape. "We are doing well," Miguel said softly, "but we must remain careful. Their persistence shows that they will not give up easily." Lila nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I know, but I feel stronger now, knowing that we can face these challenges together. I could not have done this alone." Miguel smiled. "And you will never have to. We are partners in this, and together we can overcome anything." In the following weeks, Miguel and Lila continued their careful performances in public. Each interaction was measured, each appearance deliberate, and each day brought new challenges. Rumors continued to circulate, but the townspeople's respect for them grew stronger. People began to admire their courage, seeing them as a couple united by choice rather than obligation. Through all of this, Miguel and Lila's friendship deepened. They began to understand each other in ways that went beyond the ruse. Miguel admired Lila's wisdom, strength, and integrity, while Lila appreciated Miguel's courage, kindness, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The bond between them became a source of comfort, giving them both the confidence to face whatever challenges might come next. By the end of the month, the wealthy family's attempts to interfere had lessened. The town's acceptance of the engagement, combined with Miguel and Lila's careful planning, had made it increasingly difficult for the family to act without drawing public attention. Though the threat was not entirely gone, Miguel and Lila had achieved a significant victory. They had created a space in which Lila could feel safe, and the power of careful strategy, courage, and trust had proven stronger than wealth or intimidation. As they sat on the hill one evening, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, Miguel reflected on the journey so far. They had faced suspicion, intimidation, and countless small challenges, yet they had persevered. And in the quiet moments between the struggles, they had discovered something unexpected, a connection built on mutual respect, courage, and shared purpose.
Lila leaned against him, her voice soft.
"Even in all this chaos, I feel hope. You have made a difference, Miguel." He smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "No, Lila, you have made a difference too. Your strength gives us both the courage to keep going." And so, as the night settled over the town, Miguel and Lila prepared themselves for the challenges that would inevitably come next. They had survived the first wave of suspicion and intimidation, strengthened their bond, and proven that courage, careful planning, and trust could overcome even the most persistent threats. But they knew that their journey was far from over. The true test of their plan and their courage was yet to come. Miguel had spent weeks preparing for this moment, though he did not know it would come so soon. The quiet sense of relief he had felt after successfully keeping Lila safe was about to be tested in a way he could not ignore. Word had reached him that the wealthy family, frustrated and angry, had decided to confront him directly in the town square. They were no longer sending observers or spreading rumors. They wanted answers, and they were determined to get them in front of the entire town. Early that morning, Miguel woke before sunrise. He had barely eaten, barely slept, and yet his resolve was steady. He went to Lila's cabin, where she was already awake, gathering her thoughts and preparing herself for what might come. Her calm presence gave him strength, even as his heart raced with anticipation. "They are coming today," Miguel said quietly as he mounted his horse. "They want a public answer, and we cannot show fear." We have to be careful, deliberate, and united. Lila nodded, her eyes reflecting determination. I understand. I will stand with you. We will show them that no one can force me into something I do not want. As they rode toward the town square, Miguel observed the streets slowly filling with people. Word had spread quickly, and townspeople had gathered to watch the confrontation unfold. Some were curious, others sympathetic, and a few whispered with concern about the potential danger. Miguel felt the weight of all those eyes on him and Lila, but he kept his focus on the task at hand. When they arrived at the square, the wealthy family was already there. The father, tall and stern, stood at the center, flanked by his son and a few trusted men. Their expressions were serious, and their posture exuded authority. Miguel dismounted his horse, keeping his movements calm and measured. Lila followed, standing beside him with a steady gaze. The crowd parted slightly, giving space for the confrontation to begin. The father spoke first, his voice loud and commanding. "Miguel," he said, "we have heard these rumors about you and Lila. We know what you are attempting. Tell us, is this engagement real, or is it some foolish trick?" Miguel squared his shoulders and met the man's gaze without flinching. "Sir," he said politely but firmly, "Lila and I have chosen to be together. There is no trick. I respect her and her choices, and she has agreed to this partnership willingly." The son stepped forward, his tone harsh. "Do you think you can deceive us? Lila belongs to our family's plans. Lila belongs to our family's plans. You are poor, powerless, and have no right to interfere." Miguel took a slow breath, remaining calm despite the rising tension. "It is not a matter of power," he replied. "It is a matter of respect and freedom. Lila has a right to make her own choices, and I will support her in that. Nothing more. We do not see conflict, but we will not allow coercion." The father's face darkened, his eyes narrowing. He spoke quickly, trying to intimidate Miguel. "You may speak boldly here, but do not forget who controls the town. One word, and you could lose everything you have." Miguel looked around at the townspeople who had gathered. Their eyes were fixed on the confrontation, some with curiosity, others with concern. He realized that their presence gave him an advantage. The community respected his honesty, his hard work, and his courage. He decided to use that to his benefit. "I understand your position," Miguel said, his voice calm and clear. "But the people here can see the truth for themselves. I have lived among them, worked alongside them, and earned their respect. They will judge us fairly, and they will see that this is not an act of deceit, but an act of care and protection." Lila stepped forward beside him, her presence commanding attention. "I will speak for myself," she said, her voice strong. "I am not a possession to be given or taken. I have made my choice, and no one has the right to force me into a life I do not want. I am grateful for Miguel's support, but this is my decision, and it is final." A murmur ran through the crowd. People who had been uncertain before now nodded in quiet approval. Miguel felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for Lila. She had spoken with courage, standing tall in front of a powerful family in an entire town. Her strength and dignity shone brightly, even in the face of intimidation. The father's face reddened, and he struggled to maintain his composure. He glanced at the crowd, realizing that his attempts to intimidate them had not succeeded. The townspeople's eyes were firm, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. For the first time, he understood that he could not easily manipulate public perception in this small community. "You may have the support of the people," the father said, his voice tight with frustration. "But that does not change the situation. Lila is still under the expectations of our family. Miguel remained calm, his mind focused. Expectations do not give anyone the right to control another person's life. Lila is free to choose her path, and those who truly care for her will respect that. The son, growing angry, stepped forward again. You are risking everything. What makes you think you can stand against us? Miguel looked at him steadily. Because I am not standing against you, he said quietly. I am standing for her. That is a difference you may not understand, but it is what matters. For several moments, silence fell over the square. The father and son exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to proceed. Miguel and Lila stood together, calm and unshakable. The townspeople's presence and silent support made a powerful statement. Finally, the father took a deep breath and nodded, a reluctant acknowledgement of their failure to intimidate. Very well, he said finally, his voice low and controlled. It seems your resolve is stronger than we expected. We will not force this issue further. For now. Miguel felt a wave of relief, though he did not let his guard down completely. Thank you, he said respectfully. We hope that respect and understanding will guide all of us from now on. The wealthy family turned and left the square, their expressions unreadable. Miguel and Lila remained, standing side by side as the crowd slowly dispersed. People came forward to offer congratulations, support, and words of encouragement. Children waved and smiled, neighbors nodded in approval, and Miguel felt the satisfaction of having faced a formidable challenge successfully. That evening, Miguel and Lila returned to the small hill overlooking the town. The sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light over the rooftops. They sat in silence for a few moments, letting the quiet peace of the evening wash over them. You were incredible, Miguel said finally, his voice filled with admiration. You stood tall, spoke clearly, and never let fear control you. Lila smiled softly. I only spoke what I knew was right, and I had your support. I could not have done it alone. Miguel nodded. We make a good team, he said, feeling a deep sense of connection. Together we can face anything. For the first time in weeks, Miguel felt a sense of calm. The immediate threat had passed, and Lila was safe, for now, but he knew that vigilance was still necessary. Challenges could arise again, and the wealthy family might not give up entirely. Still, this victory was significant. It had proven that courage, careful planning, and the support of the community could overcome even the most powerful threats. As night fell, Miguel and Lila remained on the hill, watching the stars emerge in the dark sky. The town below them was quiet, safe, and calm, and the weight of tension that had pressed on them for so long began to lift. They had faced intimidation, threat, and suspicion, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than before. In that quiet moment, Miguel realized something important. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the determination to act despite fear. And trust, the trust between people who cared for one another, was a strength that could withstand even the most persistent challenges. Lila turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft starlight. Whatever comes next, she said, we will face it together. I feel safer knowing we are united. Miguel smiled, a mixture of pride, relief, and deep respect in his expression. Yes, he said quietly, together we can overcome anything. And so, under the quiet night sky, the two of them sat, ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. The confrontation with the wealthy family had tested their courage, their planning, and their resolve, but it had also strengthened their bond and proven that integrity, respect, and determination could triumph over fear and intimidation. The confrontation with the wealthy family had passed, and for the first time in weeks, Miguel and Lila felt a true sense of relief. The town seemed calmer now, and the whispers of doubt had faded. People had seen their courage, their respect for one another, and their honesty, and slowly they began to accept the engagement as real. More importantly, Lila was finally free from the threat of being forced into a life she did not choose. Miguel returned to his ranch each morning, tending to his cows, repairing fences, and doing the daily work that had once felt lonely and tedious. But now, each task was accompanied by a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. He had acted to protect someone who could not protect herself, and in doing so, he had discovered strength he did not know he possessed. Lila's life also began to change. She spent her days visiting neighbors, helping where she could, and walking the hills around town. She felt a freedom she had never known before, the kind that came not from wealth or comfort, but from the knowledge that she could make her own choices. And though she and Miguel were engaged in name only, there was a growing bond of trust, respect, and understanding between them that neither of them could ignore. People in town began to treat Lila differently. No longer was she seen as someone controlled by another family or threatened by circumstance. She was admired for her courage, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. Children followed her with curiosity, neighbors greeted her warmly, and even some of the more skeptical townspeople began to speak in praise of her dignity. Miguel watched all of this quietly, feeling proud, not because of the attention she received, but because he had helped her achieve it. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Miguel and Lila continued to maintain their public appearances, careful to honor the engagement story, but they also began to allow themselves small moments of private companionship. They walked together along the trails, shared simple meals, and spoke openly about their hopes, dreams, and fears. Their conversations often drifted to memories of their childhoods, stories of family, and the struggles they had each faced. These moments, though small, helped them grow closer and built a foundation of mutual trust and friendship. One afternoon, Miguel and Lila were sitting on a hill overlooking the town, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant lowing of cows, and the occasional chirp of a bird. For a moment, the world felt calm and safe, and Miguel allowed himself to breathe deeply, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. "You've changed a lot since we first met," Miguel said softly, looking at Lila. "You faced so much, and yet you never gave up. I admire that more than anything." Lila smiled faintly. "And you, Miguel, have shown courage I did not expect. You risked so much for me, for my safety. I will never forget that." They sat in silence for a few moments, letting the warmth of the setting sun fill the space between them. Miguel realized that the bond they had formed went beyond their shared challenge. It was a connection built on respect, trust, and shared experience, a foundation that could last far longer than the engagement story they had created. Over time, the wealthy family stopped attempting to interfere. Their influence in the town was limited, and the townspeople's respect for Miguel and Lila made it clear that further attempts would be futile. The engagement, though initially a ruse, had become a shield that allowed Lila to live freely, and the community had come to see Miguel as a man of integrity, courage, and honor. As life returned to a sense of normalcy, Miguel found joy in simple routines. He tended to his ranch, enjoying the steady rhythm of work and the satisfaction of a day well spent. He spent time repairing fences, caring for his animals, and walking the hills with Lila. Each moment, though ordinary, was filled with a quiet happiness that had been missing from his life. Lila also embraced her newfound freedom. She visited friends, helped with chores, and spent time exploring the landscapes around the town. She discovered joy in small things, the pattern of the clouds, the scent of wildflowers, and the quiet moments of reflection by the stream. Most importantly, she knew that she could make choices for herself, and that knowledge gave her a strength and confidence that had been suppressed for too long. Their friendship continued to grow, and though the engagement remained in place publicly, it became more than just a story. They supported each other, shared experiences, and found comfort in one another's presence. The bond they had formed in the face of challenge had matured into a deep connection that neither could deny. One day, Miguel invited Lila to walk to a quiet meadow he had discovered near the edge of his property. The air was warm, the grass soft beneath their feet, and the world around them seemed to slow down. They spoke of hopes for the future, of dreams they had yet to pursue, and of the small joys that life could bring. "I feel like we've come a long way," Lila said quietly, "watching the sunlight play across the hills, and yet I know there is still so much to see, so much to learn." Miguel nodded. "Yes, but I think the journey is what makes it worthwhile. Every challenge we've faced has brought us here, and every step has made us stronger." They walked in silence for a while, letting the peace of the meadow fill their hearts. Miguel realized that life was not just about survival, wealth, or status. It was about courage, integrity, and the relationships we build along the way. Lila had taught him that in the face of fear, one could find strength, and in the face of challenge, one could find hope. As the weeks passed, their lives settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and extraordinary. They maintained the story of the engagement when necessary, but privately, they celebrated the trust and friendship they had cultivated. Miguel found fulfillment in protecting and supporting Lila, while Lila found joy in the freedom and respect she had gained. The town also began to reflect the changes in their lives. People admired Lila's independence, respected Miguel's courage, and recognized the power of standing for what is right. Children learned lessons of integrity and bravery simply by observing the couple. Neighbors found inspiration in their story, and slowly, the community became stronger, kinder, and more understanding. One evening, as Miguel and Lila sat on the hill overlooking the town, they reflected on everything that had happened. The challenges, the fears, the triumphs, they had faced all of it together, and in doing so, they had grown not just individually, but as partners in life. "You know," Miguel said quietly, "I never imagined that a simple life on this ranch could lead to something so meaningful. Helping you, standing with you, it has changed me." Lila smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun. "And you've changed me too, Miguel. You've shown me that courage, kindness, and trust can create a life worth living. I will never forget that." They sat together as the sky turned deep blue, the stars beginning to appear one by one. There was no fear, no threat, no pressure. Only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that they had faced adversity and emerged stronger, wiser, and united. In the weeks that followed, Miguel and Lila continued to live their lives with courage and integrity. The engagement remained a public story, but it had served its purpose. Lila was safe, respected, and free to make her own choices. Miguel had proven that bravery and kindness could overcome even the greatest challenges, and together, they had built a bond that would last a lifetime. Their journey had been difficult, filled with uncertainty and danger, but it had also been filled with hope, trust, and growth. Miguel and Lila had learned that true strength comes not from wealth, power, or status, but from courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand for what is right. And so, as the town settled into quiet evenings, the ranch flourished, and the hills stood tall and steady around them. Miguel and Lila continued their lives together, free and full of hope. The engagement that had begun as a ruse had become a symbol of courage, friendship, and the power of choosing one's own path. They had faced fear, challenge, and uncertainty, and had emerged not only victorious but transformed. Life was simple, yes, but it was rich with meaning. Every sunrise brought new opportunities. Every task was a chance to grow, and every quiet moment together was a reminder of the bond they had forged.